Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. Davis here with another math lesson. Yeah, we're going to be going forward today and we're going to continue working on time on the hour. We know that telling time is a really important life skill, and so when we're looking at a clock, we have to be able to understand what time it is. So we have to be able to recognize the different parts that we're seeing on a clock and what the numbers on a clock actually stand for or represent. So that's what we're going to be working on again today. We're going to be thinking about, of course, time, telling time, and our focus in first grade right now is time on the hour. We're starting with a brand new hour. We're going to be thinking about two different kinds of clocks in our study. We're going to be able to read and understand how an analog clock works, and we're going to be able to recognize the parts of the clock, and the different parts have jobs. And once we understand what those jobs are, then it's easy for us to be able to read a clock, an analog clock. We're also going to be able to look at a digital clock, and we're going to be able to see that there are numbers represented to tell time on the hour, time in general. So we're going to be thinking about when we look at a digital clock, because now digital clocks are everywhere. They're on our computers, they're on our watches, they're everywhere. So we have to be able to understand how those work as well. So yesterday, we were taking a close look at the analog clock. We also said that an analog clock is also called a face clock, and we thought that was kind of funny. At least I know, I think it's kind of funny. And we recognized that on an analog clock, there are some parts, there are some moving parts, and the parts that we're seeing and working with are called hands. There are 3 hands on an analog clock, but we're going to be focusing on 2 of the 3. So we're going to be thinking about the long hand and the short hand. The long hand is the hand that tells how many minutes have ticked, and the short hand will be telling us what hour it is. So both of these hands have a job that they're doing. Of course, there's one more hand that ticks very quickly. That's the second hand. But we're going to focus on these 2, and that's going to be the center of our study. All right, so yesterday we were also thinking about this teaching clock, which I really like because it helps me identify that the shorthand or the hour hand is red, and it matches the inner numbers on this analog clock, which are actually the hours. So this red clock matches with the red numbers, and those are the hours. So anytime this guy right here is pointing at a number, that's what hour it is. And the hours go 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, and when the clock hands move, they move in a clockwise direction. Now this minute hand is the long hand, and it's long because it's got to go beyond these inner numbers, because it's not reading the hours, it's actually ticking out the minutes. And so if you go on the outer edge, you're going to see blue dots and blue numbers, which on this teaching clock match this minute hand. These are the minutes that it takes to actually make an hour. There are 60 minutes that have to tick in order to make a new hour. That's a lot of minutes. So if you're looking at the outer edge of your little mini clock as well as my teaching clock, you will notice that there are some numbers. So at the top of mine, there's a 60, and I also wrote 00, because when 1 hour ends, it takes 60 minutes. And a new hour is actually represented by no minutes because this minute hand hasn't ticked any minutes yet. In between each number are 4 blue dots. Those represent minutes. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes. And then the 5th minute is actually represented by a number. So the numbers are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and 60. And then we start a new hour. But this minute hand is actually ticking 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So they just represented those minutes with a dot. So we understand now that even though this is pointing up at the 12, it's actually going beyond or past the 12. That's because it's a long hand, and it's actually reading the outer edge of this whole clock. All right, so that's what we're thinking about when we're thinking about analog time. Now, let me grab the digital time because we're going to be working with digital time today as well as the word o'clock. This is a digital clock, and you have to understand how to read this digital clock as well as the analog clock. We probably see more digital clocks now than we do analog clocks. So if you're looking at this digital clock, the first section is actually the hour. So the hour on this digital clock is 1 or 1 o'clock. This is 1 o'clock. So the hour is 1. And then here's a really important separation. So when you're looking at your digital clock, you're going to notice 2 dots. You're going to notice that the hour is separated from the minutes, and that helps us just be able to quickly glance at a digital clock and understand, oh, it's 1. And this separates the hour from the minutes. Now, if it's o'clock, in the minutes section, you're going to see 0, 0 minutes, and that's because there's no time yet. No minutes have ticked forward. The reason that there are 2 zeros, and this is really important, because as the clock ticks, it's going to be ticking 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And so in the ones section of this 2-digit number, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. When we get to a 2-digit number, then we have a place for it. So sometimes when we're looking at the minutes in a digital clock, you will actually have a 2-digit number. So we've already set up the clock for the times that it's going to be a 2-digit number in this space of minutes. So that's why we're always going to represent in our digital clock in the minutes section 0, 0. Now we're going to be working on some activities together today. So let's get started. So yesterday we worked with the analog clock, and the first thing we did was just match time. I made the time on the hour, and then you made a match. So go ahead, if you've not already gotten your little mini clock, go ahead and run and get it. You know, I'm going to be right here waiting on you. We're working together today. All right, hopefully you've gotten your clock and we're ready to go. Now, my clock says 2 o'clock, so go ahead and match my time. Remember that you're going to be moving clockwise, and you want this minute hand pointing up, straight up at the 0, 0, and then the hour hand points at the hour of 2 because it's 2 o'clock. All right, now let's make another hour. I'm going to move forward, and I am going to, let's make 7 o'clock. Now 7 o'clock is later, of course, than 2 o'clock. So I'm moving clockwise. The hour is 7 o'clock because that minute hand is starting a brand new, it just finished the old hour of 6, and now it's a new hour of 7. All right, let's do one more matchy-matchy. Let's do 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is later than 7, so I'm going clockwise. Okay. So I'm pointing my clock, my hour hand at the 10, and I'm pointing my minute hand at the top, which is actually reading 00 minutes. All right, now that you've gotten warmed up just a bit, let's do our second activity. Yesterday, we were looking at the word o'clock. We had a little card, and it had the hour, and then it had the word o'clock, because that's another way that you could read time on the hour. So let me grab my cards. I'm going to show you a card that says blank o'clock, and you're going to make that time match. So we'll have the word with the hour, and then we'll have a match on our face clock. All right, here we go. Let's do, let me grab this one, get situated here. How about we make 1 o'clock? 1 o'clock. So I'm going to make 1 o'clock on mine. We're going to be representing time on the analog clock to match the way it can be represented with the hour in the word o'clock. 1 o'clock. 2 different ways to read 1 o'clock. All right, let's do a few more practice with that. So I'm grabbing 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, I'm going to go clockwise. 9 o'clock is later in the day, so I'm going forward. Don't you go clockwise, counterclockwise, go clockwise. All right, the hour is 9. We're up at the top, pointing at 00 minutes. And now we have a match. 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock. All right, let's do one more. Let's do 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. So 12 o'clock is later than 9 o'clock, so I'm going forward in time. This one's pretty cool on the analog clock because both hands are pointing up, but because we know that this guy's actually reading the 12 and this guy is reading 00, even though they're pointing in the same direction, they're not doing the same job. 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Okay, now that was a little refresher with o'clock. Now let's move to digital time. I'm going to show you a digital card and then you're going to make a match on your analog clock. So let me grab my digital cards. All right, let's get started with time on the hour digitally. Here we go. All right, this time says, I wonder if you can read this digital clock. Hey, did you say 5 o'clock? If you said 5 o'clock, then you're correct. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my hands forward clockwise to show 5 o'clock. And I want you to do that also. So here's 5 o'clock on the analog clock and on the digital clock. The hour is 5. There are no minutes. If it's a brand new hour, your minute hand has not started ticking to these little minutes. So it's 5 o'clock. We've got a match there. All right, let's do this time. Remember I told you that sometimes the hour in the minutes will be built with 2-digit numbers. So we've got to have a place for those. Hey, can you read this digital clock? Hey, if you said 10 o'clock, you are correct. So let's make a time match here. We've got 10 o'clock on the digital clock. And I'm going to make 10 o'clock on my analog clock. And 10 o'clock is later than 5 o'clock. So I'm going to go forward. 10 o'clock on the digital clock, 10 o'clock on the analog clock. So now we've advanced from reading the analog clock and being able to understand that time can be represented by an hour, a number, and then the word o'clock. And now we're also able to understand how a digital clock is to be read and what those numbers mean and the separation too. All right, let's make another hour match. How about we do 6 o'clock? The hour is 6, and there are no minutes in a brand new hour. And I'm going to go forward clockwise to 6 o'clock. Hour is 6, 00 minutes. So these two are actually telling the same time. Now let's do 2 more. Let's do 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Okay. And going forward. All right. There's 2 o'clock on the analog clock. Did you make a match? Is it getting easier for you to work with your clock, your analog clock, and make time match and time on the hour? Hopefully you're getting more familiar with what your clock is saying to you. Okay, we're going to do one more practice for today with our, oh, here's a good one. I'm not going to tell you this time. All right, I want you to read the time on your own. And now I want you to make time. I'm going to make it on my clock too. And we'll see if we have a match. I'm going to show you that one more time. All right. Think about what hour that clock says, that digital clock. Okay, we ready? And the time is 8 o'clock. You are correct. Remember, when you're making time on the hour, that minute hand is pointing straight up past the hour, past this number, and reading the minutes. And the digital time will represent with 00 minutes. And that's a match on the minutes. And then the hour is 8 on both of these clocks. Now, here's what I want you to work on your own so that you can get just a little bit more familiar with working with analog time and digital time and making a match. So in your third packet, which I know some of you are picking up this week, there is a sheet in there. It says telling time on the hour. At the top, go ahead and put your name, and the directions say match the times to the correct clocks. So they have given you an analog clock that is already telling time on the hour for you. And then at the bottom, they have the digital time represented. And you can see the little scissor symbol right here. So go ahead, and I would just cut off the bottom. You know how I like to be organized. Cut the bottom off. And then there's a dashed line around those digital clocks. Go ahead and trim up around this, this digital section here with the dashed lines. Just eliminate all the scraps and go throw those away. And then you'll have a big rectangle of digital clocks. So here's where you want to be very careful. You're going to separate. You could even cut that rectangle in half. And then you'll have 2 halves of that whole rectangle. And then you can start cutting out your individual little digital clocks. Again, if you want to cut out 1 clock at a time, I like to do it this way when I have a lot of pieces. I like to cut out 1, and if all of this extra paper is trimmed away, it's easy to cut 1 little time box out, and then go ahead and glue it with its o'clock match, its analog clock match. So I like to do cut and glue, but first you're going to want to trim away all that extra paper so that you can get rid of all the paper scraps you don't need. All right, boys and girls, you're going to be working on matching the analog time to the digital time as we're going forward, telling time on the hour. All right, get busy. You've got a lot of work to do. Don't forget to send me a picture of your completed time on the hour sheet. All right, until next time, have a good one.